and welcome to the Phoenix Blue update for Tuesday the 22nd of November, brought to you by Tom Colley. Quietish day on FX in the markets, only one substantial move on the pound, which we'll discuss in a moment. The other big moves we saw were on crude oil, based on suggestions surrounding the OPEC production cap agreement. Some more positive things being said, particularly by the Russians yesterday, but this is something that we're being extremely cautious of because it's not currently being driven by fundamentals. It's being driven by, or even technicals, it's being driven by news, rumour, etc, etc. The other area of interest that we'll look at in a moment is we saw new highs on the US indices. Before we do anything else, we'll have a look at the news. Only significant news yesterday was ECB President Draghi speaking at the Strasbourg Parliament. He didn't actually say very much, but there were comments coming out from other ECB members just reiterating what we anticipate to be an extension on their QE programmes from the current end date, or the end date on bond buying certainly, which is currently March 17, an extension on that, which we anticipate at the next meeting in December. Today we've got CAD core retail sales. Now this will be interesting because these figures have disappointed for the last 3 months. Initially we had the forest fires, which caused some potentially were one of the reasons for that, and we saw a big miss back in September, but subsequently the data's been disappointing. Last month we had a 0 number. The forecast this month is 0.6, so obviously a significant increase, so we will be watching that. We'll have a look at the Canadian chart in a moment to see why as well. One of the things to remember is bank holiday in Japan tomorrow, so be aware of that. At the open tomorrow, there will have been much reduced trading in that Japanese session. Okay, let's start over with the dollar index as usual. Well, we saw a pullback yesterday. We were anticipating some form of correction. We ended up with basically an engulfing bar to the short side there. We've got a level that we're watching here at 150, that being the previous highs. They were 13-year highs, so a significant level that we're looking for a retest. So far we're not down at that level. Over on the yen, couple of factors here. Yesterday we didn't get the pullback on the yen through the day that we anticipated. Then overnight we had an earthquake in Japan. It occurred in the Fukushima area, where the huge earthquake was, with all the problems with the nuclear power station in 2011. The reports of that are minimal damage by comparison. There was talk of a tsunami, but again that turned not to be too serious. So we did see this market sell off into that news, but it's now recovered everything that it lost on the strength of that announcement, so it doesn't look like there's going to be any significant market effects for that going forward. But as you can see, the yen remains weak, even when the dollar is pulling back. Yeah, we had a doji type bar yesterday, but if you compare with what we've just looked at on the dollar index, we haven't had an engulfing type bar. Comparably, the dollar would be around down, or the close last night would have been below this close here to be comparable. So we're still seeing yen weakness despite that slight weakening on the dollar. Over on the pound, this was a big FX move yesterday. We saw early afternoon, we saw a move. There was actually a 1% move over a 1 minute bar. It eventually turned into a 2% move. Rumours around this were relatively low liquidity, and one very, very large trade which was actually placed on pound yen, that rumour had it was a $700 million trade, and was potentially the cause for that. Interestingly, on the pound, this reflected what we were discussing at the last boot camp last week, was that when we get movements on the pound, it tends to go and not pull back. As we here, Phoenix Blue are predominantly retracement traders in that we wait for a break and look for price to pull back to the level before we take a trade on. That is a cautious method, but quite often on the pound we do need to think about trading on some sort of breakout scenario, simply because, as clearly here, it hasn't pulled back, although this wasn't very much an instant movement and there wasn't a lot to signal it prior to that. But something just to remember when you're placing trades on the pound or looking to is you may find that price isn't pulling back. We're clearly at another level here. We've seen pound strength even into the post-Trump onslaught from the US dollar. Relatively, this has been the strongest currency. We have potential to the upside right up to this 1.285 type level around here, so we will be looking for opportunities intraday to the long side that way. Over on the Aussie, again, we had a nice pullback yesterday. We're looking for intraday opportunities to get into this market, to take it to the long side on a contrarian trade before reversing in conjunction with the dollar index and back down to the short side. If we see ongoing dollar strength, we definitely can see this sort of level, if not right down at these sort of levels for the Aussie and potentially the Kiwi as well. We mentioned in the news update about the Canadian dollar. We had a bearish day yesterday, showing CAD strength. That was on the back of a lot of crude strength. It didn't reflect the degree of movement we saw on crude. That is because this market is somewhat disconnected from crude. We can usually follow it quite as being much more of an inverse to the crude chart. But at this moment in time, the Canadian economy is showing weakness. So into dollar strength, it has been failing to play out on its strength to the downside here. Even when the dollar's pulled back, we've seen it fail over the last 3 months to pull back to this trend line here, which it has done correspondingly on crude. The other thing that I mentioned briefly at the introduction was we've seen new highs on the S&P and the Dow. We are watching these. We anticipate these moves simply because it's seasonally a long bias on almost all worldwide equities through to the end of the year. Add into that expectation that the new Trump administration will be looking to repatriate US dollars, which are currently held by corporations abroad. They currently have to pay the full corporation tax on those, which I think is about 35% for them. So they have been retaining those funds and investing them overseas. There's talk of Trump giving them a window to bring that back on a one-off, maybe 10% tax reduction, or sorry, 10% tax level. That would bring a lot of equity back to the US. But the talk in the trading or the financial press has been that a vast proportion of that monies will come back to the corporations in the States, and they will simply buy their own shares, diluting the pot of shares and effectively driving equities to the long side. If that does happen, we can see a definite ongoing move to the long side over the next, really forward maybe the next 12 months. A lot of the strength within the indexes over the last 12 months has been put down to companies rather than investing their profits or the cash they're sat on, actually buying back shares. What that does is dilute the pot of shares, increases the value of the remaining shares, hence price moves, and we see this type of move. So certainly something to be watched and purely from a seasonal perspective, a lot of opportunity potential there through to the end of the year, but we could see some these trades being longer lasting and more significant. Okay guys, that's it for today. Again, not expecting anything too dramatic again today. Bear in mind Friday's Thanksgiving bank holiday for the US, so we've got a short week. After some quite dramatic weeks, we might see traders sitting on their hands somewhat, or even closing trades, taking profits ahead of the bank holiday. Reminder that we at Phoenix Blue are on Instagram. If you have access to Instagram, we're at Phoenix Blue Trading. If you are logged into that, you'll see we quite often give intraday updates on certain markets, trades we're taking that maybe are intraday or we haven't mentioned in the video here. Those same posts are also on Twitter. We're at Phoenix B Trading on Twitter. So a couple of opportunities to keep your eyes on what we're actually doing. You can also get updates on forthcoming events like our free trading days, etc. Okay guys, that's it for today. Have a great day's trading and we'll speak to you again tomorrow. Take care.